Hello and welcome to Reddit Roast number 33, the Halloween special. John is back. Welcome back, John. We have both changed our background to our worst nightmare in honor of this Halloween tradition. Mine is the cubicle, an AI generated image of a grey cubicle in an office with loads of other people around me and having to commute, and it's my absolute worst nightmare, and so that's why that is my background today. John, what's your Halloween worst nightmare background?
Well, Sam, first of all, happy Halloween. If you peer a little bit closely, you can see a generic rejection email from HBS. And that is the worst nightmare that, a prospective student can have the day before these releases are released. So
Yeah,
we tend
absolutely.
not to have many of these at Sam Weeks, but it does happen.
We had, I think, about a 50% success rate getting through to interviews this year for HBS. So definitely,
Oh, you're on mute, Sam.
the other scary part of today's roast is that the profiles we're going to be roasting are a bunch of overachievers. Um, And this should scare you because this is who you're up against. We've got some Forbes 30 under 30s. We've got IITs. We've got some military intelligence analysts and all around some pretty strong GMATs and no low GPAs, etc. So it's going to be an interesting roast today. John, should we get stuck in?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. So the first profile is a 29-year-old brown Brazilian. Slightly strange self-description, but okay. Brown Brazilian applying for round two or round one next year. Has a GMAT 710. Undergrad was in their top 10% of their class. Is a first-gen college student. Has 2.5 years of work experience in DCM. 2 years in investment banking as an analyst at a European bulge bracket. Has some cool transactions, mainly TMT and infrastructure, it looks like, and then left the bank and has dedicated themselves full time to their nonprofit. Extracurriculars outside of work. Founder and CEO of Black Finance, a nonprofit that prepares low income Black university students for careers in IB, has been supported by major financial institutions, high placement rate, currently 30 active students. So quite good extracurriculars there, I think, John. Forbes 30 under 30 for 2025, part of the Obama Foundation mentorship program for young leaders. And the goal is to continue working in investment banking, focusing on capital markets, expanding Black finance. And the target schools are basically as very, very high end, HSW, Columbia, some T15s in there, the Yales, Stearns, Dardens of the world, and a few European programs, LBS, INSEAD, and ESA. So, John, first, high level overview. How do you see this profile?
I'm not going to mince my words, Sam. I think this is a pretty strong one. Academically, stats are decent. Without the GPA, it's hard to know. But with a 710 and a surely decent quant grades to support that iBanking career foundation, I don't see any red flags. Demographically, URM for sure. I think one, not just in a URM, but one who uplifts their peers in their community. This will resonate beyond just being a URM. ECs wise, I think is fairly strong, even better that one of his ECs turned into a full-time role, and that shows deep passion and continuity. Obama Foundation endorsement is a plus in my books. Professionally, mission-driven nonprofit that focuses on careers in iBanking, that is clear, that's niche, that builds on his prior experience. I love that.
Mhm.
Um, goals racks my goals is a little bit of a puzzle. It's this person wants to go back to iBanking. What happens to the foundation then? We can talk a little bit about what a better goal might be. But I do prefer OP's idea of their second goal of expanding Black finance internationally, maybe impact investing. Again, we can talk a little bit about this more, Sam, but um, I think, goals, I think room to grow in the goals bucket. Overall, I like the profile. It is Halloween, so no surprises, please, with the GPA. I hope that's okay. I think it comes down to the narrative, and obviously we can help with that. But I think
Mm.
this is a pretty strong profile, Sam.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think on the GPA, we're just going to say we're going to see top 10% of the class and just hope that that means it's a decent GPA. And you kind of have to assume it will be, I think. Okay. So let's talk about a couple of interesting points that came up here. I noticed that in these European schools, INSEAD and ESA are in the mix.
Mhm.
INSEAD, one of the requirements they have is you must have a second language that is more, at a good level, not necessarily fluent, but at a good level. And then studying a third language. It looks like OP might have Portuguese as a second language or English as a second language, whatever, and is maybe studying a third. It's the same thing for Spanish for ESA, by the way. Very, very useful to have
Yeah,
Spanish
yeah.
for ESA. So maybe a little bit of a language component on the European schools, which I think is going to be okay. I think is going to be
Mhm.
a relative advantage for OP on the European side. Okay, let's talk about the M7 schools specifically in the US. Do you think OP has a chance?
Yes, I think I think, mix of European schools and M7 programs, again, it will come down to the narrative. I would think OP has a higher chance with M7 if OP were to go with a goal that isn't vanilla investment banking. And hopefully that GPA stands. And, as you mentioned, Sam, with top 10% of the class, I don't think it's going to be too far off from the target.
I'm not sure. I'm thinking about these IB goals, John. They've already got maybe 5 years of experience in IB. I feel like of all the people we see who say they want to pivot into IB, and by the way, I think we have a couple of them today as well. Like I feel like OP's got a better chance than many. No, what do you think
Sure.
the gap is for this person to pivot into an IB? Like, what do you think they need to do? I think it's a reasonable goal. You're clearly a little bit more skeptical. What do you think they need to do to make that goal more achievable?
Having a long-term goal and a stronger narrative. I think iBanking is definitely credible as a short-term goal, but as a
Hmm.
long-term goal, I want to see OP continue that thread that he started with Black Finance. Perhaps scale that, across borders. But I think I see investment banking more as a stepping stone for OP than it is an end goal.
I see.
I think in addition to that, we have to contend most folks who are applying to schools with iBanking as a goal tend to have very strong stats. And you're also fending against, other people, even international people, URMs who work for top name brands and bulge brackets. And so that is
Mm.
one thing to consider as well.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. I'm aligned. I think that with the goals, like there's a way of massaging those together and
Sure. Yeah.
that can make it work. In my opinion, this is a Harvard, Stanford, Wharton applicant, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With a strong narrative.
With a strong narrative. And so I'm imagining something that explains why this Black finance group was spawned, like where this came from. It's
Hmm.
probably quite a personal story there,
Sure.
leading to a mission of
Hmm.
enabling more low income Black students to get into investment banking, leading into like how I've already pursued this mission, growing Black finance to where it's at, while simultaneously pursuing a career in investment banking. Short term goal, return to investment banking while continuing to grow Black finance. Long term
Hmm.
goal, commit fully to Black finance. And
Yeah.
maybe there's a couple of really specific metrics that OP wants to focus on. For example, bring in 100, have 100 active students per cycle, for example, and maybe set a specific target for that. I think that can work
Yeah.
really well. I think OP should be aiming for HSW, M7 as a slight fallback, and European schools are a bit of a curveball in case there are maybe visa issues, for example. No mention of visa here, but Brazilian, there is, I guess, a potential for some visa question mark there. So maybe the European schools act as a hedge there.
Quick thing though, Sam.
Tell me.
HSW with a 710 and a Q46.
That's fair. I do think that's the Achilles heel, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's expected for OP for him to have a little bit more robustness and quantitative skills, especially if he's applying to financial, you know, finance roles. But I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a story
It's
there.
fair. The IB applicants tend to have among the highest scores, don't they? And OP is
Yeah.
going to go firmly against them. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely a fair point. So do you think OP should consider retaking the GMAT?
If, I mean, in round two, I don't think there's much time, but if OP has had a track record of scoring higher in the GMAT,
Mm,
especially with a quant at least in the 48 plus range, then I would
mm.
recommend it. But at
It
that
looks,
point, she would be taking the Focus Edition.
yeah, it looks like they might be on the cards already because they've said considering round one next year, presumably
Yeah.
that's to take the GMAT again. So of those two plans, round two this year with a 710, round one next
Yeah.
year with a 705,
hmm
695, maybe.
Yeah.
What would you do?
Oh, it's hard to say depending on what happens next year, Sam. I would say I think I think that despite the 10-point difference, I think a GMAT Focus Edition score starting with a 7 is quite a powerful thing,
Yeah.
especially for URM.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm leaning a little bit towards round one next year if the plan is to retake the GMAT and OP
Sure.
has some gas in the tank to really put their head down and study. Okay, awesome. So I think we've covered most of the questions there. I think a
hmm
bit of a long-winded roast, but we got to the point. Strong profile overall. I think we agree with a few clear things to work on. Should we move on to goal profile two?
Sure.
Cool. So, this applicant is looking to land an at least 50% scholarship. Quite a big ask. White, male, 30. From a small country in Europe, LGBTQ+. Focus Edition has a 715. Thinks a 735 might even be possible. It's pretty solid. Work experience 3 years as an intelligence analyst in the military, a year as a data analyst at a startup, and a year and a half as a consultant at the Big Four. Majored in accounting, GPA 88%, had a higher GPA on first year's, Dean's List, blah, blah, blah. Third year, something happened. Also volunteered and initiated activities for the LGBTQ community throughout my adult life. And post MBA, I plan on working in biopharma, specifically M&A, for many reasons, which are sentimental and professionals. Definitely seems to be some sort of interesting angle there. Dream schools are Wharton and a few other, an HBS and a few other M7s and T10s. Also be thrilled with. Now, that's a much, much lower list of schools there. Not often do we have somebody aiming for Harvard and Foster. So we can talk about that. Okay, overview of the profile. How do you see it?
I like this profile overall, Sam. I think academically, OP seems to be sandbagging himself. I think it's stronger than he thinks it is. I wouldn't worry too much about the 88 with a good optional essay, and schools
Okay.
don't need to report that GPA on a 100-point scale anyway.
Mhm.
Most don't. The 715 will work its magic. 735 is even better, and it's just at that point it's just showing off. You know, most coaches will say stick with a 715, but if you can get a 735, why not give it a shot? Demographically, white but small European country, depends, right? Are we talking Liechtenstein small or Czech Republic small? Or is it Eastern Europe or Western Europe? That also plays a role too, whether it's ORM or URM. Meaningful LGBTQ work in the community. So that's a good strong point for the extracurriculars, especially if OP is able to show tenure and a good track record and impact in that EC that will help OP significantly in this application. Look, the professionally, he has a good mix of Big Four military client side. There's a strong connective tissue among those, especially if it's industry related and even more importantly, links to the goal, then, I'm sold. Goals wise, I would like to hear a little bit more about the biopharma bit. As you mentioned, Sam, probably a meaningful story behind it. I would say, if OP has experience with biopharma, either through his time at Big Four Consulting in the same industry, that would also, help his case. I
Yeah.
would say that going from Big Four, I don't know if it's consulting or accounting, to M&A, might be a step far. But, again, I do believe that there are plenty of due diligence work experience to be talked about, in either roles, that can be instrumental in sounding confidence among AdCom that M&A is an okay path. Yeah. So overall, I think it's a pretty strong story. It's a pretty strong profile, Sam. I think the story needs to sell it.
Hmm. Okay. Cutting to it, do you think a 50% scholarship is at least 50% in the US is achievable?
Not for the M7 schools, maybe for the T15, T20 schools, especially because I assume that OP is international.
Mm. Well, yeah, is most likely international. Yeah, I'm totally aligned on that. As Alex Zarganis once said in one of our interviews, Alex Zarganis, one of our colleagues, was a Columbia grad, and he said there were no poor international students at Columbia, and it kind of captures the sentiment of like into these top American programs, particularly the M7. They've got people applying from all over the world who are desperate to come. They don't need to give a 50% scholarship to anyone. They can fill the class with people with internationals without scholarships. So they don't need to. So I would say that if money is a factor, if money is the issue here, then OP hasn't got any European schools on the list. But if you got a semi decent scholarship to a European program, let's say you got 30K scholarship to a European program, it's only 1 year. Fees are, let's say, 80K. You've got 30K off. You're looking at a 50K bill in terms of tuition. Mm-hmm. Compared to an American school without scholarships, it's like more 200K and north. So if money's the issue, I think you're much more likely to get a good admit and scholarship and MBA from a European school, OP is, than getting a 50% from an M7.
Yeah, I'm live with
Okay.
that.
Now let's talk about this LGBTQ. I think, John, there's a really interesting angle here. LGBTQ plus military. It's often a narrative, often it's something I've seen in the past where those are two like worlds that collide sometimes and create some great application stories.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's an interesting narrative there, particularly because OP doesn't have, as far as I can see, any experience in biopharma, really. Unless the startup is specifically biopharma related, we don't know. Unless the major engagement that they worked on in the Big Four was somehow biopharma related. OP doesn't have investment banking experience. As far as I can see, doesn't have standout biopharma experience. So why the hell is their goal M&A and biopharma? It's for me, it's a bit of it's a stretch and a bit of a worrying one. You're obviously on the same page. What do you think? Just looking purely at this experience, this work experience, what do you think might be a more realistic goal or a more palatable goal for the business schools?
I think sticking with the function, so some strategy or specialized strategy is a wise choice, and maybe a tangential industry. So maybe consulting, maybe a different kind of, maybe it's consulting in a broader context. Maybe it's client side corporate strategy, potentially an LDP. But that one would have to, I think for that one, OP would need to show a little bit more leadership experience. But I think either of those are fair game, Sam. What do you think?
Yeah, I want to knock IB on the head. We've seen like the last applicant we just roasted had clear IB experience, is going into IB. That's not so much of a leap. This is a massive leap, and I'm really, really worried about it. I like your idea of data-driven strategy in an industry where OP has experience. In other words, slightly sticking with more or less the same function, or a small change in terms of function and a small change in terms of industry. That's how I see this working. I think that's a nice compromise. Okay, John, let's talk about schools. OP, as I said, OP is really broad here, really, really broad. Like the fact anyone who's applying to Foster and HBS has got too wide a range. They've misjudged something there. They're either way too low or way too high. Where do you think OP's sweet spot is? Where do you think OP should be focusing?
I think T10.
T10. Okay. So you think
T10.
the Stearns and sort of Booths and that sort of niche.
I think I don't think OP shouldn't apply to those schools. In fact, I think there's one M7 school missing that OP ought to consider, which is Columbia, and obviously in the wise, in the words of our wise Alex Organis, there are no poor international students at Columbia, but Columbia actually has one of the greatest number of pharma healthcare electives among the M7s. And so if OP were to focus on the biopharma angle, provided that he has experience in the area to speak
Mm.
of,
So
whether
like
it's,
strategy and biopharma,
correct,
consistent with what we're
correct,
saying. Mm.
then Columbia could be a good option for him to apply to.
We have got
But
CBS here as in one of the
oh,
dream
I
schools, but it's
see.
great that
Okay.
you're drawing attention to that. I think agree. I
Yeah.
think that one of the dreams. I think that's
Yeah.
probably that's a really
Yeah.
good fit.
Yeah. So I think there are a couple T10s missing here that OP might consider, including Yale and Fuqua. Fuqua also has a fantastic concentration in healthcare and pharma as well. But what are you thinking, Sam? What are your thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, I think I am aligned that if OP was willing to take on a loan for the MBA, then they could really be targeting T10, M7. I think that would be a realistic goal. But if OP is really focused on costs, and that seems to be quite important, then I guess OP does need to be down here. And
Yeah.
I think OP should also be adding the top European schools, the INSEADs, the
Hmm.
ESAs, the Oxfords, the Cambridges of the world,
Hmm.
and hope for a decent scholarship there. And then I think the cost
Yeah.
equation would probably make those quite tempting. Okay,
Yeah.
so I hope thoroughly roasted profile. A few unknowns though, particularly in terms of narrative and goals.
Hmm.
So I guess it's going to depend on how OP puts all that together, and that's going to be really the driver of the result, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's move on to profile number 3. Profile review for M7, Indian female, 27 years old. Okay, Indian female, 27 years old, working as a front office quant at an US bulge bracket bank, cross asset exposure, led strategy teams for trading desks, had a promotion, integrated bachelor's and master's degree from a top IIT with a decent GPA. GMAT, 6.95 focus edition, will be retaking. Extracurriculars, has organized leadership events for women at my firm, but no community impact. Interesting. Thinking about applying to Wharton, Columbia, CBS, basically M7s, plus INSEAD, and then a couple of safeties in the T10. Recommenders are solid. One's a Yale and MIT alumnus who was at the head of the trading desk. So it looks like OP is quite confident on the LORs. So a high level overview, John, given I know there's a couple of gaps in there, but what do you make of it?
I think this is a strong profile. You alluded to the IIT earlier in this roast session, Sam, and this is the one to look at. Academically, female studying in IIT, not just with a rigorous major, but at a top tier location. FYI, there are tiers to IITs, there are tiers to IIT majors. And so this one definitely commands a lot of respect. And that CGPA is pretty solid. A 695 GMAT is also solid. Fly for many of the top schools, T10s, but for that Indian demo, I would hope that GMAT FE starts with a 7. But that's just my unfiltered thoughts there. Demographically, we already talked about her being an ORM, but she's a female, and so that in a male-dominated industry, so that's a plus. I know she has some concerns about the extracurriculars. It seems like most of it is relegated to institutional work, nothing outside the place of work and study. This could be an issue, but I think if OB can counter this by talking a little bit about the impact she's created, not necessarily community related, that could help allay any doubt that adcoms have about her extracurriculars more broadly. Professionally, look, it's strong. I mean, front office quant in a US bulge bracket is meaningful. I don't know if it's a US bulge bracket in the US or US bulge bracket in India. That wasn't clear. The onus then is, in either case, is to focus not just on being a smart person, which she clearly is, but also a leader. And I think we can talk a little bit about this later, Sam. The recommender and LORs will have to push this. Goals wise is a little bit vague. I think corp development strategy combined in a place no bigger than a unicorn in an industry that you care about is something that I would recommend. And we can talk a little bit about what, some ideas for that, Sam.
Yeah. So we
Now,
jump in here on the
yeah,
long-term goals that are mentioned in the comments, which I didn't run through. To pivot away from quant to strategy roles is the main piece. And long-term wants to start a fintech or AI firm with an M7 pedigree. So
yeah,
I think, yeah, basically pivot from quant to strategy, pivot from banking trading floor to strategy, not uncommon. Okay,
not
keep going.
uncommon. Yeah, I think it's fine. I think that she shouldn't pivot totally. I think there are overlaps between what she's doing now in strategy role, which is why I said a lot of roles at unicorn companies combine corporate development and strategy together. And I
Mm,
think she would excel, at a role like that. I'm not sure about fintech and AI unless she has a compelling story, but it's a very saturated goal. I've seen, no
yep.
joke, 300 stories about Indian nationals returning to their home country to empower the underbanked. This is a narrative I've heard so many times. So that's my thought about the goals. Overall, look, Sam, strong potential. I would maybe consider taking the GMAT. It's a very strong academics otherwise. And, she would need to focus on leadership, a strong story, and maybe tighten up those goals.
Yeah, nice. Okay, let's talk about extracurriculars. She's clearly worried about this, right? I'm worried that there is my application's lacking extracurriculars with a community impact. So I'm going to jump in on this one actually. OP, I think let's think about why extracurriculars are important. They're important because they give the admissions or they give you an opportunity to tell the admissions about your leadership outside of the workplace, And typically people would use these community activities in there. For example, HBS leadership essay. HBS essay 2 is a leadership essay. As long as you've got other material to use there, for example, organizing a leadership event for women at your firm, then the gap isn't going to go as far as like handicapping you in the essays. Yeah, they're going to look at your resume and be like, maybe there's a bit of a gap here. But it's not like you're not going to have anything to write for the leadership essays because you've still got this ERG work you can use. So I think don't be too worried about this. It is a small gap, but at the same time, like you're working US bulge bracket on the trading floor. Like, what do they think? You're going to go and like give out food at a homeless shelter after work? Like, not
Mhm.
sure it's completely realistic. So I think that you don't need to worry too much about that lack of community impact if you use the ERG work instead. John, have I missed anything there?
No, I think you're right on the money there, Sam.
Okay. Let's talk then about what OP can do to position themselves more strongly for their application. John, do you see any clear steps that OP can do, given that we are round 2, or that they're
Mhm.
applying round 2, and we're already in 31st of October, sorry, as we speak? What do you think OP can do to strengthen their profile?
Well, there's not much. I mean, it can seem a little ingenuous and too rushed to start any kind of new extracurricular at this point in time. You really
Sure.
realistically have a month. I think instead you could take stock of what the inroads you already made with work and deepen those inroads, whether that is planning an additional community event, whether it is taking stock of what's been achieved and reinforcing or magnifying impact in some way. So, for instance, okay, we've hosted a couple workshops helping training folks with diverse backgrounds. Why don't we take this up a notch and um, host a roundtable with the CFO of the company. I'm making it up here, but finding a way to enrich existing experiences at the firm, whether it's a project with an ERG or something else, and then getting a recommender, if that recommender is a sponsor, to talk about it in their recommendation.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So rather than reinventing the wheel, starting a whole new extracurricular from scratch, maybe organize an event within within a group that you're already involved with that is perhaps a little bit more community focused. For example, a leadership event for the women at the firm, rather than doing one that's just internal with your, the women in the company, what about inviting women from neighboring companies, from other companies? What about broadening that impact outside of just the company itself? Maybe hosting an event and just extending the invitation to other working professional women, for example. So you can maybe, and by the way, keep a diary of that, right? Write down any challenges that you have, because that will be great interview material. That will be great essay material. So rather than
Absolutely.
reinventing and starting a whole new activity, use the platform you've already got to start an activity that maybe addresses the community gap a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, so overall, I think M7's quite realistic, no?
That's possible.
It's possible. Okay.
Credible.
Credible, good word. Okay, awesome. Let's move on to the next profile. Applying to 4 schools in round 2. Already got their sights set on Yale, Haas, ESA, and LBS. And as a former admissions evaluator at Haas, I'm really excited to hear your thoughts with that school in mind, particularly. However, I'm also looking to add another school where my chances of admission might be higher. A safety, basically. Now, here's the kicker. Company would fully sponsor me, and I'll return to Brazil after graduation. So, visa, employability, not concerns. Profile, 29-year-old female, black, first-generation Brazilian. 6 years of experience at the largest private bank in Latin America, including participation in a highly selective leadership programs. 40 selected from 70,000 applicants. What? Currently, product manager on a data and tech squad where I've delivered strategic projects for some relevant multinationals. GMAT focus, 655. GPA, 7.8. Bachelor of Engineering from Brazil's oldest private civil engineering school. An interesting comment here. Attended on a government scholarship for outstanding performance. Scored 99.96th percentile on the entrance exam. What? Co-founded a scholarship holders collective at my university. So a bit of humble bragging there, I guess. Really nice. Not maybe very relevant, not very recent, perhaps, extracurricular, but still, fairly impressive. Which of the following schools would give you the best chance? I tell you what, before we talk about schools, how do you see the profile overall?
I like the profile overall, Sam. We'll do a quick flyby here. Academically, female in engineering school and full government scholarship. That's a cracking national entrance exam score. Although that comes a little bit at odds with that okay GPA and a middling GMAT. Overall, it's not bad, Sam, but not outstanding. Demographically, Brazilian first-gen full government scholarship also pays it forward. I think this is an attractive demographic. I also think this aligns very well with Berkeley Haas's defining leadership principle of going beyond yourself. Obviously most schools will really appreciate this, but Haas especially would like it. Extracurriculars are meaningful and impactful, especially when it's entrepreneurial in nature. As a PM at the largest bank in LATAM, largest private bank in LATAM, I think that's a good, I think that's strong professional experience. Even more meaningful that she is likely fluent in both data and finance and has leadership experience. That's multi-pronged. I think like a Swiss Army knife, I think Swiss Army knife is always welcome among all business schools. Now, goals-wise, being sponsored, this is like literally a missions chef's kiss. I think long-term goal needs to work a little bit harder, though. We can address that in the questions below. Overall, decent profile, realistic set of schools, Sam. I think there's potential here. What do you think?
Yeah, excellent. Where do we start? Let's start on the government scholarship. So full scholarship to undergrad, if I remember correctly. Here, full scholarship to undergrad. Now, given that applicants to MBA programs don't declare their scholarships to undergrad in the same way as they declare their GPA, where schools are ranked on it, schools are not ranked. MBA programs are not ranked on whether their incoming class had scholarships during undergrad. So why do schools care so much about this government scholarship for undergrad?
You mean what is that school? Why do the colleges care, or why do business schools care?
Why does the business school? So how does Haas look at a full ride undergrad scholarship? I assume it's a positive.
Sure, of course. I mean, obviously, it shows academic merit for sure. It also shows that, in some cases, someone who receives a full scholarship or sought one, probably, grew up under less means versus others, and that as a window into that person's background, which could be helpful. But I think it's it's the academic performance and being differentiated from your peers that stands out more than
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Like another admissions office has decided that I'm worthy of a full scholarship at a great
Correct.
school. And you guys are also admissions officers, so maybe you feel the same way. Yeah.
That's validating.
Validating, exactly. Okay. And then same thing, same question for sponsorship. You said admissions chef kiss. Can you explain why
Mhm.
that is?
Well, part of the metric of school rankings and everything is, whether you're a student or the person who graduates from your school is employed after graduation, right? And schools want more than anything for their students to have a job after they graduate. And obviously, this is a little bit tougher in this in more recently. And so when you have guaranteed employment, that means that the school doesn't have to worry that you will get a job. Um, and it guarantees you a salary, among
A
other
good
things.
job as well, right?
Correct.
With a decent salary.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Okay, let's get to the applicant's question then. So they're asking which of the following schools would give me the best chance of admission given my profile. What do you think about this list of potential target schools?
I think those are all within fair game. I'm assuming that, I mean, Berkeley and Yale and ISA and LBS are also included in that mix. I think they're all
I think this is a
peers.
fifth school that she's asking about. Yeah.
Fits full. I would say, look, I think they're all a good fit for OP. I would say, with a goal around in the engineering space, and being a product manager, I think Duke could be a good fit. Uh,
Mm.
I think Dartmouth would benefit from her character. Dartmouth tends to be very selective about the kinds of people that they attract for their class. They want people who help others. And, it's clear from OP's work that she is someone who likes to give back to her community. And so a tech would value that. And I think she would also appreciate the class that they have curated. So Duke and Tech come to mind, Sam, but what do you think?
Yeah, I'm seeing an interesting parallel. I'm not sure if this is done deliberately, but ESA and Darden are both heavily case based.
Yeah.
ESA, Darden, the other obvious one is Harvard Business School that jumps to mind. Very, very case focused. Most classes will involve a case discussion. So if
Mhm.
case is really attractive, and maybe it is because ESA is on the list, then Darden might be the good final choice. But I think, John, the next question is let's assume that maybe it's a Darden or a Duke is the safety. That puts OP at 5 schools. We generally recommend people apply to 6 or more. If OP
Mhm.
was going to add a 6th school, maybe a M7?
Yeah. I think that is not, I think that is perfectly fair.
I think OP's got to. I think OP's got to. I think you regret it if you don't. OP, you're clearly you have a track record of academic excellence, maybe with a slight speed bump with the GMAT potentially, but you've got these great scholarships, you've got the great GPA, etc., or decent GPA, etc., at a great school. I think you'd kick yourself if you didn't at least try to get into for example, um, a Chicago booth, right? Data-driven
Yeah.
decision making, and you've been a PM on a data and tech squad. They would love that.
Mhm.
Maybe even a Harvard, but Harvard's going to need a higher GMAT score. I think that's fair. We agree.
I agree.
Yeah.
But if I were her, you know, I, I wouldn't shut it out completely.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, 655 is about a 700 on the old test, which is about 30 points below their average. We've seen people get into Harvard with lower schools.
And what's more, Sam, I mean, uh, Harvard and Stanford are less intent on playing the rankings game than the
Mm.
other M7 schools do, right? And so I feel like if you take a look at their score ranges, their MBA, their GRE and GMAT score ranges, they are definitely wider at HBS and Stanford than they are at other schools like Columbia, for instance.
Mm, interesting. So there might be a little bit of a throw a curveball at the at HSW, see what comes up. Okay, good. John, next profile.
Sure.
Conscious of time as well. Interesting one for several reasons. Okay, so applying to East Coast schools plus Booth is what I see from that list. My plan is to transition to IB in New York post MBA. Recently took the GRE, scored a 330. 4.5 years of experience, bachelor's in accounting, began in FP&A and healthcare consulting, then an FP&A role in professional sports team in New York. In my current role, I've led financial analysis, a couple of really big projects. Will be promoted in December. Outside of work, volunteered at a community theatre. It's quite interesting. As a usher after graduating college, I regularly serve at my church, lead Sunday school classes for the youth, etc. Now, there's, I think, goals discussed somewhere here. If you just give me a moment, I'm going to look into the comments to try and find these. But I think OP's, talking about oh yeah, sorry, it's here. Pivoting into IB, which is, I think, the big question mark on this profile. Certainly is for me. John, how do you see the profile overall?
Again, I think this is pretty strong in a few ways. I think we'll do a quick flyby here.
Mhm.
Academically, GRE is strong. GPA
Yeah.
is a little unclear. Quanti profile is a plus. Demographic, by OP's involvement in the Church of Latter-day Saints, I'm assuming is Mormon, so Canadian Mormon. ECs, I've worked with multiple engineers and finance individual contributors who are faith oriented, and they lean on church activities to demonstrate leadership. It is definitely meaningful if positioned in the right way. I would consider even getting those involved in the church to write recommendations for you. Mormon's a plus because they often do a lengthy mission abroad at a faraway location, and that involves a lot of logistical management, talking cold to people, handling crises. A lot of I think a lot of transferable experiences that would lend well to things you can write about in your essay. Professionally, look, congrats on the promotions. Sounds like great impact. I think it's strong there overall. The goals can be it's clean. It makes sense. Obviously it's competitive to go into IB in New York City. I would like to see a little bit more of a sweeping and aspirational long-term goal. Maybe you can find a place to reform the sporting industry, kind of call back to the expertise you developed, during your time working for this company. Overall, I'm really craving a story out of this, Sam. If you if he stays within the finance bucket, OP will be fending against a lot of other people who want to go into New York investment banking, who come from top tier bulge brackets and shiny PE shops like Blackstone, with even better stats. So this is where a story is going to have to work very, very hard.
Yeah, let's focus on that IB. I think that for me is the key issue here. Like people who want to going to break into IB in New York have often got experience in IB in Toronto, in Delhi, in what other London, other financial hubs. And so they're making less of a leap. And I think OP is perhaps going to be put up against them and might not win that battle. I'm a little bit wary on that. I would prefer a narrative focused on somewhere, an angle where OP really does have an edge. For example, OP will probably have one of the highest GRE scores of any applicants coming from the sports space. Right, that's a very
Absolutely.
high GMAT score, GRE score
Mhm.
in for that bucket. So why not throw yourself into that pool and maybe pitch a position into a strategy role, like a higher level strategy role that's got some finance work in it, but that positions you in the sports scene where you're one of the best applicants. Now, obviously, once you're on the MBA, when Citibank come knocking and recruiting, obviously you can throw an application there. But just in terms of your narrative, I'm not sure that's going to be the strongest angle. So overall, John, schools, where do you think OP credibly has a chance? Do you think these M7s are realistic?
I would say the lower M7s are definitely within range. I mean, HBS and Wharton are going to be, tougher sell for OP. I think and that's a pretty strong GRV, of course, but depending on the goal, could be tough for
I think
for Wharton
what
and
it comes down
HBS.
to, for Wharton and Harvard is they get the very, very best investment banking applicants. But Wharton,
Absolutely.
one of the best finance schools out there, they get the very best investment banking applicants, and you're going to go against them, and you're not going to win. I'm afraid, not with that story. So, if you can position yourself somehow sport related, some different alternative, unusual angle, maybe, but I'm wary otherwise. Okay, awesome stuff. Good. Let's leave it there. John, I'll let you get going. I know you got your next meeting. Thank you very much for the roast as usual. Really, really appreciate it. And I will see you again in a couple of weeks' time.
Happy Friday, folks. Happy Halloween.
See ya. Happy Halloween.